Well, thank you, Erica, and thank you all for joining us again for what is our third and final session in this energy series. I just want to give you advance notice. You can now sign up for a new Outlook webinar series. If Eric can just advance to that next slide, we are launching what is normally our in-person Outlook conference. We are now holding this by webinar this year, so we've got 5 sessions, one looking at more the global national outlook with leading economists taking part in a panel discussion on the 27th, and then we'll be having a provincial outlook session, one focused on each of the 4 provinces, talking about the regional economic outlook, some of the global national factors that are affecting each province, and what we see coming out of COVID this year, the big drop we've seen, how we see that recovery playing out, and what are some of the key factors. So again, you can go to our website, outlookconference.ca, and register for that. I certainly encourage you to take a look at that. So we are in the final session, as I mentioned, of our series on energy. If you can go to the next slide, Erica, just a quick recap of where we've been. All these presentations from the previous sessions are on our website, and you can watch the recordings. But the first one was looking at some of the bigger picture issues around our energy future, the outlook for power costs, issues around clean growth, how do we manage this transition. There was a lot of insightful discussion on that. 2 weeks ago, we had our second session, which was really looking at the role of different energy technologies. We talked about hydrogen, small modular nuclear, or we talked about solar and how we can integrate some of these through smart grid initiatives. So we got into some of the more micro technologies that are playing a role in our transformation. And then today, as we conclude this energy series on the future of energy in Atlantic Canada, we have leaders from our 4 provincial utilities, because we can't talk about energy without talking about electricity generation and distribution and the key role that this plays. So we're very much looking forward to the remarks from our 4 panelists today. And now I'd like to hand over to our partner in this series, Colleen D'Entremont, who's the president of the Atlantica Centre for Energy. Very much appreciate them partnering with us on this session, and Colleen's been co-hosting these sessions with me. So I'll now hand over to Colleen to introduce, to say a few words and introduce our 4 speakers. Thank you, Colleen.
Well, thank you, David. I am Colleen D'Entremont, and I am president of the Atlantica Centre for Energy. And we are a think tank that examines energy issues in the Atlantic region. We are dedicated to getting information to the public on energy issues that's confronting Atlantic Canadians. This webinar series has given viewers a glimpse into the energy sector to help them gain an understanding of the challenges as well as the opportunities across this region in the coming months and the coming years, and of course the coming decades. Today's session does give us all a window into how each of the leaders of the major utilities are addressing the challenges that they are facing and seizing the opportunities that are presented to them. We really shouldn't underestimate the time of disruption that we're in and the time of transition. Their challenges are truly formidable. But not to be discouraged, it is a time of repositioning for the decades to come. The decisions that we're making today will absolutely have impacts in 2030, 2040, and 2050. Each leader has to look at its own organization's unique advantages and integrate and look at innovations that make sense for this region. It's also a time of unprecedented regional cooperation. Utilities and governments are working together to meet changing demand parameters, operations and maintenance, and also to band together for regional infrastructure requirements. So welcome to all of us who are here today. We have 4 excellent panelists to bring us their perspectives. All of their bios, by the way, are available on the APEC website. So if you want further information about them and their careers, feel free to look them up. First up is Jennifer Williams, and she is the president of Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro. Speaking second will be Rick Janega, interim CEO at Nova Scotia Power, as he transitions away from that role, and the new CEO is actually beginning this week. Next up will be Jason Robarts, CEO at Maritime Electric, coming to us from PEI today. And rounding out the panel is Keith Cronkhite, who is CEO at MB Power. So after the panelists' introductory remarks, we will have a general discussion led by David. So I am now going to pass the virtual mic over to Jennifer to kick things off. So Jennifer, please proceed.
Thank you, Colleen. Making sure everyone can hear me okay. Maybe Colleen can give me a wave. Yes, Great. Okay. Thank you for inviting me to be here with you all today. I'm really happy to be with my neighboring Atlantic utilities, in particular, Rick, Jason, and Keith. Certainly looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have to collaborate and to talk about our industry here in Atlantic Canada. And welcome to everyone joining us virtually today. It's the way of today, but hopefully it might even be the way of the future to allow us to continue to participate even at a distance. I'm really looking forward to the good discussions. So first of all, a brief introduction to Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro for anyone who's not familiar with us. We really just go by hydro here in Newfoundland and Labrador, and we're the primary producer and transmitter of power in the province. We have some distribution in the remote areas of the province. We're a subsidiary of Nalcor. We are Crown owned and obviously a regulated utility with about currently 1,800 megawatts of installed generation. The vast majority of our generation is hydroelectric, about 80% currently, and that will move to about 100% for customers in the province once Nalcor completes and reliably integrates the Muskrat Falls project into our system. This will allow for our thermal plant at Holyrood to be shut from a generation perspective. It's going to stay for my synchronous condensing perspective, but the generation portion will be shut down. The island of Newfoundland, where the vast majority of the province's population and power demand resides, has always been isolated from the rest of North America, and that's changing with the Muskrat Falls project. We're going through this very significant transition now. We're also connected to North America through the Maritime link to Nova Scotia. And when we think about how we get connected to North America through the other part of our province, through Labrador, we have the Labrador Island Link, and it runs, through the island, under the sea between Newfoundland and Labrador, overland into Labrador to Muskrat Falls. We're then further connected through the Labrador transmission system into our corridor in Quebec. So we are on the doorstep of greater integration with our neighbors and the larger electricity network in this part of North America. So we're in the midst of a massive change, the biggest change that's occurred here in our province since the 1960s. Just a routine couple of years, but really no, it's not quite routine. It's been very interesting. Being an interconnected system comes with numerous new regulatory procedures, policies, guidelines, compliance, and oversight. We're in the middle of an ever important need to plan a reliable system, to operate it reliably, and be focused on cost control. To us, these things are really critical to being a good neighbor to our utility neighbors in Atlantic Canada. It allows us to work together to help deliver reliable power in the region. So in order for us to be a good neighbor, our own house must be in order. To that end, we've been working really hard over the past few years in the areas of reliability and cost control. Those of you familiar with our region will likely know that we went through a significant supply issue in 2014, commonly referred to locally here as Dark NL. Unfortunately, during that time, our customers lost confidence in us. However, we are not the same organization that we were during those events. We've drastically improved and changed the way we operate. Our reliability and cost results prove this. We underwent great scrutiny and assessment, and that period of scrutiny and assessment was really hard on the organization, and in particular our employees, who really felt it personally. But that scrutiny and feedback was really necessary. We listened to the scrutiny, we listened to the feedback, and we incorporated it. And we're really building a lot of pride internally now, as well as in the province. And I'm really proud to work for Hydro alongside all my colleagues. All of this work has prepared us to be a better regional partner so that we can be the neighbor that our other utility neighbors can rely on. We're also really focused on cost control, ensuring the lens of cost management is front and center in all of our decision making. With the integration of Muskrat Falls, electricity in the rates in this province could rise dramatically. We are working on this with the federal government on rate mitigation, but we must focus on managing all of our costs, and this is now more important than ever. It's our obligation to our customers and, frankly, to the whole province. So that's some context and background of where we were, where we are, and who we're striving to be. Now I'm going to touch on some of the big decisions and files that are on our plate. First, our next major file. This critically important piece of work for us, now and into the future, is our reliability and resource adequacy study. It is essentially a review and recommendation to our regulator for our planning and operating standards for decades to come. We had to undertake this review with the intent of recommending new standards because our old standards for an isolated system were simply no longer applicable. So as an interconnected system, we had to change the way we plan and operate. This is to be reliable to our domestic customers, but to make sure that we are treating our neighbors and not impacting their system in any kind of a negative fashion. So through this study, we're analyzing a wide range of possible growth and operating scenarios over a 10-year period to determine what available additional resources or investment may be required and at what point in the next 10 years. This study recommends to our regulator how we should operate and how we should trigger our next supply sources. Depending on how our regulator responds, with input from our interveners, meaning how they order us to plan and operate, we may have to make significant decisions in the near term. Decisions such as potential additional generation or resource addition, how much and what form. So we must carefully assess and gain input into our long-term approach to ensure we are striking the right balance between reliable service as well as cost. As part of the study, we're also considering how to incorporate electrification into our assessment horizon. Electrification is critically important in the province right now as a solution to best address the Muskrat Falls costs. Electrification can also obviously affect demand. So we're considering how we may better utilize things like rate structures to manage that risk. We're keen to look for solutions that may be less traditional for our jurisdiction. It's daunting, but really interesting for anybody who loves the utility business. I believe other jurisdictions are ahead of us here in options available. I'm sure there's a real opportunity for Hydro to learn from the other jurisdictions on these topics and others. And of course, we know each of the utilities in Atlantic Canada is facing their own set of unique challenges. So working together and learning from each other is really important. Over the past number of weeks, there's been a great deal of discussion around the notion of an Atlantic loop. It's certainly an interesting concept to discuss, and we here in Newfoundland and Labrador are actively involved. The perspectives and unique challenges of each utility will play a part in determining what happens next in terms of an Atlantic loop. One of the things in our jurisdiction we must consider and closely analyze is our availability of firm capacity during peak periods. Our reliability and resource adequacy study that I just mentioned is one of the final pieces of information that Hydro needs to inform what capacity we will indeed have available to go along with the abundance of energy we're going to have from Muskrat Falls, and that therefore then may be utilized across the Atlantic Loop or an Atlantic Loop. So we're really excited about the work that we're undertaking in this space with the Atlantic provinces as well as Quebec. So it's an interesting time with many opportunities for discussion and a constantly changing landscape. For me, I feel it's an important time to be involved in this industry and the decisions being made. I look forward to the ongoing discussions. And of course, any decisions we undertake, we have to prioritize customer input. We know that as we look to the future, customer expectations are changing. I'm sure my fellow panelists are seeing this as well. We're not boring utilities that are experiencing no change, far from it. We're undergoing massive change, and customers can and should be part of the conversation to solution finding. Hydro believes we have a responsibility to engage with our customers to assess their feelings, preferences, perceptions regarding electricity in our province. We respect the customer's view to both cost and reliability. 2 years ago, we began a direct engagement with customers. This engagement is making us a better utility. This consultation, not approval, is something we are working hard at. It is truly making us better. We want to ensure that customer engagement occurs prior to any major decisions or investments. As part of the study I just mentioned, our customers have indicated that they prefer us to make system investments very cautiously. This is a direct reflection of customers' concerns regarding rates once Muskrat Falls is online. They agree, reliability is not at all costs. There is a limit. Finding the limit is the challenge for us as utility leaders, and challenge accepted. We get energy from listening to and being responsive to our customers. Our customers are also like other utility customers with more and more discussion around the green economy. Here in Newfoundland and Labrador, we're seeing an increase in inquiries about electric vehicle supports. We're really excited to be front and center in the pursuit of greater electric vehicle adoption in Newfoundland and Labrador, an important electrification initiative. This year, we're building the first fast charging network across the Trans-Canada Highway on the island part of the province, installing 14 level 3 chargers and 14 level 2 chargers. We are wanting this to be the first phase of a growing provincial electric vehicle network. We're also looking for opportunities in our smaller isolated systems. While we have an abundance of clean hydroelectric power on our larger interconnected system, we still have many communities in isolated rural parts of the province that rely on diesel for firm power. We continue to pursue opportunities to help offset that diesel-powered energy with greener energy solutions, while being cost-conscious of implications of adding to these existing systems. We're also actively working with Indigenous partners in Labrador for increased integration of other energy solutions in their isolated communities. While I do not speak for them, it is clear to me that the Indigenous communities in our province are very interested in being part of the green economy, and we are honored to be partners in that future. Continued consultation and discussion with these stakeholders will be important for any decisions that we make going forward. Overall, we're really proud of the work we're doing in our province. Our customers depend on us every single day. And I believe the work we're doing can also ensure we can continue to develop strong relationships with our neighbor utilities in Atlantic Canada, reaping positive benefits. We're already seeing the reliability and cost benefits of being connected to Nova Scotia. We have purchased economic energy across the Maritime link, and we've had customers see no loss of supply on the island when we have had large generators trip due to the fact that we immediately and for a short time are then supplied over the Maritime link. Our Atlantic Canadian utilities faced tremendous challenges this year while providing an essential service during the unprecedented global pandemic. If we didn't deliver, imagine the consequences. It wasn't an option. We delivered like so many times before. How we all adapted to work safely, prioritized what was important, and faced into the challenge was yet another example of our famous Atlantic Canadian resilience. All of our utilities have seen this resilience when we've been through tough times, from within our communities to across our regional boundaries. Resilience and being a good neighbor are what gets us through. Through tough times, we must learn to adapt, and we look to our neighbors to learn from, borrow from, and find common beneficial opportunities. Panel discussions like this one offer great learning and opportunity for sharing of knowledge and helps us all get better. So I look forward to hearing from my colleagues here this morning, and I look forward to your questions and the interesting discussion that I'm sure we'll have. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here with you to talk a bit about some of what Jennifer's touched on. I know importantly for Atlantic Canada, and I know having had these types of discussions with colleagues like Jennifer, Keith, and Jason previously, we know one of the main items that we face for the next decade of challenges as we try to address growing customer expectations for affordability and reliability and the opportunities that are ahead of them for energy conversion and beneficial electrification. One of the key attributes is the collaboration, the one that Jennifer touched on at the end of her discussion with us. And I think a critical piece for us in Nova Scotia as we think about the types of challenges, both the ones we've recently overcome in the first phases of starting to decarbonize the Nova Scotia electricity system, reducing coal generation significantly and growing renewable energy content in the province, to the point now where when Muskrat Falls is up and running and supplying energy both to Newfoundland and Labrador and to Nova Scotia as a part of the collaboration and agreements. The image you see in the background under collaboration is a shot of one of the converter stations, high voltage DC, that Jennifer referred to as a part of the Maritime link. And that project, now 10 years in the workings and has been in operation for just since 2018, has been providing benefits to both of our provinces, but to the region as well. And Keith will speak to it. New Brunswick Power serving as the regional reliability coordinator. All of our utilities, PEI, Nova Scotia, and now Newfoundland and Labrador, are all dependent on working together to try and supply our systems with reliable energy sources that allow us to provide our customers the service they expect. Some of the collaboration and the things that we've learned over the last decade working on the project with Newfoundland and Labrador is built off of the back of having worked for decades with New Brunswick Power and with PEI on the integration and the sharing of an interconnection just inside the New Brunswick border, just outside of Moncton, where a lot of the energy prior to the Maritime link, for anything that we would purchase in the region beyond our border was dependent on what was happening in PEI in New Brunswick at the time. And for a long period of time, even with Hydro-Quebec and New Brunswick Power, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and HQ would exchange energy off-peak and on-peak depending on marginal costs. And that type of collaboration has built a confidence where we know within the region, if we work together, we will be able to provide reliable long-term benefits for customers with a high degree of renewable or non-emitting energy for our electrification needs, which then flips to what our customer expectations are, but not just expectations, the choices that are emerging. And all of you on the call, any of you that are paying attention to some of the new energy choices, whether it's the growing supply technologies, you know, for the decades prior, we had relied on renewable energy being our hydro systems. And in Nova Scotia, much as other jurisdictions, we had tapped out our hydro resources very early on. They were economic to develop. And our transition beyond that to decarbonize then leaned in towards wind, and now solar is gaining a footprint as well. But there are other technologies that we know are coming to bear. And in that electrification and the choice, we actually see an opportunity where if you consider the whole energy wallet, what people spend on whether it's electricity or transportation today, which is oil derived, and heating sources, which can include wood or oil fired, whether it's hot water or heating, that electrification and on its own will provide opportunities where if we do it cost competitively and do it with more renewable energy content by working as an integrated system in Atlantic Canada, the opportunities to be able to provide those choices and opportunities for customers to convert their higher cost energy utilization to lower cost sources like transportation, as Jennifer referred to, with the work that's being done and the advancements in battery technology and in improvements in the cost competitiveness of each of those and the renewable energy, our customers will be able to save money with a cleaner environment that's potentially supported significantly by beneficial electrification. On the back of that, as a theme through all of what I had just previously stated, was the emphasis on the affordability. And if we think about the pressures that have been on all of our utilities to reduce emissions and improve renewable energy content, we know we faced an early challenge where the cost of renewable energy was higher than the cost of fossil fuel-based generation, and mainly because of the costs that were embedded in building those plants that have a 45 or 50-year life and sometimes longer, that we've been able to run them affordably, maintain cost control. Nova Scotia, over the last several years, you know, rate increases on the electricity side that have been less than the rate of inflation in around 1.5% for about 6 to 7 years. And an objective of all of our businesses is to focus on being able to meet customer expectations, whether that's improved reliability because of the challenges of increasing storms where we've seen higher wind levels on a more frequent basis, that working together is going to provide us an opportunity to do it. Creating beneficial electrification platforms will allow customers to take advantage of those choices and hopefully save money when you think about the entire energy wallet, and then include the emission attributes of removing carbon associated with transportation as an example, and doing it with renewable energy on the electricity system could be a significant benefit for both emission reductions and cost savings. And doing that with the affordability in mind of how we improve reliability and use technologies like battery and storage to support the intermittent renewable resources we believe working together, interconnected, it will be a better platform for us. And for Nova Scotia, we know if we're going to take the roughly 1,000 megawatts of coal-fired power plants and move away from that capacity and strength that it provides to our electricity system, we know we need continued and growing interconnections, not only with Newfoundland and Labrador, but to the north with New Brunswick and neighbors to the north. So with that, I'll glad to pass it over. I think Jason is next and look forward to answering any questions.
Thanks, Rick, and good morning, everyone. Certainly very happy to be here this morning, and I agree that we are facing some challenging times these days. But I believe there's also, this is an exciting time to to come together and harness some opportunity for our region. And when I think about Maritime Electric and our areas of focus, really sort of 4 core areas that we think about. First is the evolution of our customers and their changing needs and expectations. The way customers want to engage with us today is different, and how they use our product is changing rapidly. Second is the question of, it's around how are we as a company, how's Maritime Electric doing in reducing our carbon footprint? This is an important question for us, because we are fully committed to taking the right steps towards decarbonizing and ultimately becoming a sustainable electricity company. Next for us is electrification and the need that creates for a robust energy highway. Electricity is the future, of course, and electrification means that we must have the necessary infrastructure in place for PEI, from tip to tip, obviously, and also for our region. We need that solid energy highway, I think, throughout the region in order to grow, to accommodate the resulting load growth that's coming and we're seeing with electrification, and to support that transition towards greater electrification and do that in an environmentally responsible manner. Electrification is well underway here on PEI. The government of PEI has been providing incentives for heat pumps here for a number of years, and that's supported the installation of about 13,000 energy efficient heat pumps so far. As a result of that, home heating oil, furnace oil consumption has been reduced by over 26 million liters, which is a very positive result. And we also see electric vehicles as being the next game changer for us in the coming years, and we need to be prepared for when that happens. So to meet these changing dynamics, which are occurring to varying degrees across our jurisdictions, I believe we need to do this together. We need to build on the existing relationships we have. We need to foster new working relationships, do that collaboratively, and that way we can benefit all of our customers in the region. Next slide, please. So on PEI, Maritime Electric, we purchase the majority of our energy supply from off-island. And we do that through a long-standing relationship that we've had with New Brunswick Power since the mid-1970s. So when combined with our on-island wind supply and the supply from nuclear, which also comes from New Brunswick, we are well positioned for decarbonization. And looking forward, with new wind farms that are in development here on the island, and with our plan to decommission the Charlottetown thermal generating station in the next couple of years, it's a heavy oil burning facility. I believe we are progressing in the right direction when it comes to reducing our carbon footprint. And continuing on that path is certainly a priority for us here at Maritime Electric. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, in order to do this, I believe, as a region, there is a strong need for more infrastructure so that we can continue to support electrification as the greener energy solution for consumers. And this infrastructure will support our transition away from greenhouse gas producing generation, like our thermal plant, and it'll improve our access to low carbon sources of electricity. So Maritime Electric, we're a living example of how regional partnerships and strong transmission interconnections, how they can be successful. Our first submarine cable interconnection to the mainland system in the 1970s, that enabled us to participate in the Point Lepreau nuclear generating station, which is non-emitting, of course. And it also allowed us to source lower carbon supply energy mix relative to the heavy oil generation that we had on PEI at the time. So these partnerships work. It's proven. And as electrification, whether that's transportation or space heating, which is what we're experiencing on PEI, or some other source, as that continues, customer load grows, I think a robust transmission highway and stronger interconnections in the region, they're going to be key. That's key. And to achieve that, I think we need to ensure that regional cooperation in transmission development and expansion, so that we can increase our import-export capabilities, as Rick referred to, throughout the region. That'll allow us that better access to low carbon electricity. And that's going to help us reduce our carbon footprint, and that's beneficial to our customers. I think eventually it may also allow for more effective use of our Atlantic regional generation resources down the road. I look forward to seeing that happen. And when we capitalize on those opportunities together, with the support from government, I think we're going to need that. It should help in keeping the product that we supply economical for our customers. And that's also very important. So, I'm optimistic that we can get there. I think now is the time to act. Federal and provincial governments, they're recognizing that electricity is an integral part of the solution to lowering greenhouse gases, and we certainly want to be a part of that. And I think the way to get there is through these regional partnerships that ultimately will provide us with a stronger, more interconnected system. So with that, I will conclude, and thank you, and pass it over to Keith.
Sorry about that. I didn't have my video on. Thank you very much, Jason, and I'm pleased to join you here this morning with my colleagues to talk about the Atlantic system and our current thoughts, but also more importantly, perhaps our thoughts going forward. I'd like to take a couple of minutes just to share with you a little bit of information around New Brunswick Power. We are a Crown-owned regulated utility. We're vertically integrated, which means we own generation, transmission, distribution, and in fact, right down to the water heater within the province of New Brunswick. We recently celebrated our 100-year anniversary, so we're quite proud of that. We obviously have seen a lot of change over that 100 years, and it has led to a lot of partnerships and maintaining diversity, which is something that's been very important for us from the perspective of supply options, interconnections, et cetera. And I'll go into that a bit deeper in a minute. Those partnerships and that diversity has allowed us last year to achieve 80% non-emitting electricity, so non-carbon emitting electricity to our customers in New Brunswick. And that's something that we're very proud of. We recognize also that we're not satisfied with that we need to strive to do better and get closer towards 100 and do it economically. I always say, and you've heard it many times, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And on this slide, quite frankly, I could talk most of the day on it, but I won't do that. I'll try to hit a few high points and share with you some thoughts. As you can see, New Brunswick is one of the most interconnected utilities. A lot of these interconnections with our neighbors were built for reliability reasons, but also for partnerships to move electricity back and forth across the region. And what that has allowed us at NB Power is to exploit diversity of supply, both from generation sources in the province, but also the ability to import and export electricity as a result of those interconnections. Some of the examples of this, obviously, is strong interconnections with our neighbors in Hydro-Quebec, Northern Maine, and also with ISO, or Independent System Operator, within New England. Certainly, and as Jason had mentioned, with Prince Edward Island, with the cables and their participation in our Point Lepreau station. Recently, and Rick knows this as well, with Nova Scotia, we've had joint dispatch initiatives that have benefited both companies in recent years. And when I look at these interconnections and what have we seen in the last 15 years, and I'll highlight a few of those. We've seen a stronger interconnection through the International Power Line and a partnership with Emera with ISO New England. So that was built in the latter part of the 2007 timeframe. More recently, we've seen the undersea cables being expanded with Prince Edward Island. We've had a connection, direct connection actually, with Holton, Maine, from our New Brunswick system, and certainly bringing Newfoundland into the fold with the Atlantic link, or sorry, the Maritime link, connecting to the Atlantic region has been an important development in recent years. And this also, you know, not only facilitates the movement of electricity, is that other services are part of that package, and things such as reserve sharing, so using both systems to make sure we meet our reliability requirements. We are the balancing authority, as Rick mentioned earlier, within New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island and Northern Maine. And we have reserve sharing agreements to highlight that with Nova Scotia and ISO New England. So again, it optimizes the generators, it optimizes the transmission system within our region to ensure that we're doing it in the most economic way. When I think about the next 100 years and how do we set ourselves up for success, and certainly Rick mentioned the next 10 years and 20 years and 30 years, which is on our horizon, there's no question from my perspective, and I think collectively our perspective, that continued diversity of supply and interconnections is important. What I do know is that we cannot solve for net zero carbon emissions by 2050 if we do not enhance our interconnections with our neighbors. More recently, and you would have heard of the Atlantic Loop, and I actually heard another term the other day, I think it was the Atlantic Expressway or Maritime Expressway, which I think is very fitting, to enhance connections between Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and PEI. Interconnections will certainly be a key component moving forward, and Newfoundland certainly appreciates that with their connections to Labrador and looking at our initiative under the Atlantic Clean Power Initiative of how can we solve collectively as utilities working together to ensure that we come up with the right solutions. You know, new sources of supply, certainly hydro resources in Quebec and Labrador are going to be a key component moving forward. In-market solutions like small modular reactors, and you would have heard of that in prior discussions. Smart grid initiatives are going to be, you know, key moving forward. Electrification is going to be another key component on solving and reducing our carbon emissions in the future. What I do know is that we can't solve this individually without costs going up. We've seen in our recent history is that by working collaboratively and having strong interconnections, using various generation sources, we can solve for our current needs and future needs economically. Collaboration and partnerships will absolutely be key moving forward. And when I talk about partnerships, customers are certainly at the center of that as we figure out how to use electricity more economically. Federal support has been part of many initiatives and will need to be, will be necessary, I'll say, moving forward to ensure that these generational projects get built and they get built economically. And I reiterate, to meet 2050 net zero emissions, federal participation will absolutely be necessary. So I'm going to stop there because I didn't want to repeat a lot of what was discussed earlier today. want to certainly look forward to opening it up for questions and look forward to providing additional input with my colleagues for the next little bit. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Keith, and thank you to each one of our panelists today for sharing. I think we've heard some common themes as they've talked about their own provincial situations, emphasis on reliability, emphasis on cost control and affordability, emphasis on electrification and decarbonization, important role of customer engagement, and also kind of collaboration. So I'd like to maybe begin there. Again, if you have questions you'd like to submit, I encourage you to use the chat feature to put those questions in. We've had a couple already, but let me just kind of take off which was the theme of today's session, just around Atlantic cooperation. You've all touched on this to some extent, but maybe you can just elaborate a bit. I think someone mentioned, the Atlantic Loop. There's been work done more recently around a kind of clean energy initiative that ACOA has been helping support and finance some research on. But how can we realize greater cooperation? What's worked well in the past? How do we learn those lessons? What is the potential going forward? Some of you have talked about how that might help with costs and reliability, as well as moving to lower emissions. And what's needed? Some of you have flagged, potential role for federal support. Is it just investments in transmission? Do we need to change how we operate? So if you can maybe just elaborate a bit on that, as I think Jennifer, you put it quite well, as especially Newfoundland moving from an isolated system into an interconnected system. So what's the potential? What do we need to do? How do we make this work effectively? Jennifer, maybe you want to start, because again, you're bringing on some key transmission and you've been making connections to the rest of the region. Maybe you want to just elaborate on that first.
There's a lot of things to potentially elaborate on, I think, which is fine, because there's so many opportunities. And I think the key has been for all of us to working toward any kind of solution has been that real ground setting work that we've started together along with the federal government and the provincial government a couple of years ago with the Atlantic Clean Power. So, that I think with those kinds of things have probably been talked about or been more party to party historically. Really bringing that from a regional perspective, I think, has provided for more opportunities and clearer opportunities, and hopefully the best solutions at the end of the day. So, continued consultation with each other across all of those opportunities will be really important. We've talked about it before in other forums. Ensuring we have the regulatory folks involved in these conversations will be really important, because some of these ideas are really great, and then depending on each jurisdiction's sort of license to operate, if we don't have our regulatory folks involved in the conversation early, it can be a hurdle that becomes more difficult to cross. The hurdle is appropriate. I will say that I do think that having the regulatory lens does apply, because customers are indeed protected. It's that perspective that gets placed in front of us to make sure we are really considering all of those things. But the early consultation with those bodies is really important. They're an important voice. Plus, other customers that are represented through any regulatory processes are really important to get on board for that more regional buy-in. As utility leaders, we definitely are the experts in this space, but we're not the only ones that need to be consulted. We really need to be reaching out, across our respective jurisdictions to get appropriate input. So I want to sort of underline the importance of the continued collaboration through Atlantic Clean Power.
Keith, do you want to add anything to that? Again, you've emphasized kind of the important role of your existing interconnections. Like, how does that kind of go forward, and what do we need to do to help enhance this as we move forward?
Yes, lessons learned from the past. Our interconnections have served us very well, and we know that expanding those will serve the region even better moving forward. When I think about, and I also think about Seamus O'Regan, Minister O'Regan's recent comments around net zero by 2050, and we will not achieve that unless nuclear is part of the solution. So certainly we see SMRs as part of that enabler to achieve net zero by 2050. Federal support is absolutely key. Canada has a great opportunity here to be a leader, again, in the nuclear aspect. And SMRs is really a great opportunity. We have partnerships today on that particular file with Ontario Power Generation, with SAS Power. We recently heard that Alberta wants to sign on, and each one, both ourselves with our respective governments. We've had recent discussions with Prince Edward Island, and there's interest there as well. So, you know, it's that type of collaboration, not only regionally, but within Canada, to make sure that we're working together in the best way possible to find the right solutions. As Jennifer touched on, regulatory is going to be key. Regulatory today and the environment that we live within to take a 1 year, maybe 2 year lens on requirements for today. These are long-term conversations and long-term views that we're talking about, and it's incumbent upon us to make sure that that type of conversation is put forward on a regular basis, and that we, with our policymakers, with our regulators, as Rick mentioned, we need to look at the next 10 years and beyond to solve, because 1 to 2 years is not going to do it. That longer term view and planning for the future is absolutely key.
That's great. Rick or Jason, is anything else you want to add to that? Go ahead, Rick.
A bit of a shift from the focus on the utility or system operators and the collaboration, which I agree with all of the points that have been mentioned. And I just see a couple of the questions coming through on the chat side of it, and want to address a bit of that in terms of the cooperation. The questions relating to how we, you know, consider new technologies and storage and increasing renewable energy content, you know, which are predominantly non-dispatchable assets, you know, whether it's solar or wind, you take it when you get it, and other than the hydro where you have dispatchability, and amongst the utilities, and this is a key point really that the industry needs to address. Any one of the energy entrepreneurs that are advancing new technologies, or the utilities as we bring ideas to the grid on ways to reduce emissions, and I'll speak for Nova Scotia. You know, the big challenge is to reduce carbon content, get off of coal, and I'm frankly a huge supporter of it because of what I believe in for the advancements that recent technological improvements have made, both in cost and the way they function. It's going to be critical for the grid operators to have control over the assets that are embedded, whether they are the hot water meter or hot water heaters that Keith talks about, or whether it's electric vehicles or solar, rooftop, or larger scale, which, you know, the scale of some of this is critical as well. But the collaboration is really about trying to find opportunities where we know there are lots of people in Atlantic Canada that are interested in advancing new technologies, being a part of the energy sector. And I think each one of us work to try and find spaces for that to occur, where the partnerships can be with small operators, with small businesses, trying to support them as they grow and find ways into this, but always having the lens of what the most affordable way for us to actually advance some of these technologies is. And it's a critical piece. Working together is the only way to break through it, because if we actually find batteries, as an example, are a great way for us to integrate more solar or wind generation. Today, wind has more cost effectiveness for the utilities because of the scale that it can be deployed, but larger scale farms, you know, we're building hundreds of megawatts in our Florida utilities, being done at a utility scale where you can integrate utility scale or kind of grid scale storage facilities is a great way to do it. But we know there are homeowners that want to be a part of it too. And we're trying to find ways to make sure both of them have a fit, but the importance of reliability is going to hinge back on the grid operators being able to see exactly what's happening. If you think of putting thousands of applications of small scale generation on the system, The reliability means that the operators of the system need to be able to see it, dispatch it, decide when storage occurs, when discharge occurs, and integrating that makes their job much more complicated from the big power plants that exist today. So collaboration is going to be important, some space for energy entrepreneurs to work, but the importance of managing it at grid scale where it can be the highest cost effectiveness in most cases, at least today, is going to be a critical piece of it. And cooperation, whether it's regulators, policymakers, energy entrepreneurs, and within our 4 or 5, if you look at the Hydro-Quebec position and its influence, as Keith said, in being able to bring resources to help this as well, it's going to be critical. We can't do it alone.
That's great, thank you. And Jason, maybe I can just transition to a new question, beginning with you, just around reliability. Rick was just talking about that as we add in kind of more suppliers and kind of consumers and entrepreneurs. But as we kind of move to maybe electrify and have greater dependence upon for transportation and, and home heat, it puts more emphasis on electricity. But if we're going to see more storms, if there's risk of cybersecurity attacks, how do we ensure that reliability of the electrical network kind of provincially and then even as a region? Can you speak a bit about, you know, what do we need to do? How at risk are we? What else needs to happen to kind of maintain that reliability?
Yeah, so, you know, first when I think about Maritime Electric and PEI, you know, we're kind of going through that situation right now. We are retiring a thermal station, which is dispatchable type generation. PEI has done a fantastic job growing its wind energy production supply. But for us, in terms of reliability, we are interconnected to the mainland. We get a significant amount of our energy supply from the mainland, and we source a significant amount of capacity from the mainland. And for us, being able to be comfortable that first and foremost that capacity is there when you need it, and secondly that it's affordable, is critical for our operations and our customers. We had back in 2018, 2 years ago, we had a transmission interruption through our interconnection system, and PEI blacked out for a period of time. So, you know, for us, that is a reminder of the challenges that you run into when you start to, you know, move beyond your borders into the region. But I think more importantly, though, having that security of capacity, but being able to access energy that is economical and greener is certainly important. You know, other than wind, which is not dispatchable, we don't have any natural resources to provide that dispatchable generation resource. So we need to look to the mainland, and you know, having a transmission system that is you know, reliable and stronger and able to handle more traffic, because Nova Scotia is moving off of coal towards greener technologies, and that will present challenges on the interconnections and the interfaces that we have in place today. So, you know, growing and building on that transmission system on the mainland is really important for security of capacity and ultimately supply for us.
Thank you, Jason. A question that's probably a little more specific to you, Jennifer, just around isolated communities. You did kind of reference that in your presentation, just around kind of working with those. I think just looking for a little more elaboration about what would that transition look like from diesel in terms of kind of cost, reliability, kind of environmental aspects. Can you just briefly elaborate on what that might look like, or what the options or potential plans are?
Sure. We actually have a couple of communities now, isolated communities, where we are integrating more renewables, all with the intention that it offsets, and it's priced on the basis of offsetting the diesel. So, you know, at an outset, it is a least cost solution, so that's really important. At this point in technology, we're not experimenting with these remote communities because they're so northern and so cold. So, you know, in the very near term, we certainly wouldn't see the diesel disappearing. We need that firm just in case, but we are certainly interested in incorporating more renewables. So from a reliability perspective, we're always, at this point, we're going to have the diesel there as available, but we are certainly keen to incorporate the renewables. And we have some Indigenous partners in particular who are leading the charge themselves. They really want to be a part and a partner in these solutions. So that's been really interesting to work with those groups on that. We do have in the southern Labrador area, we had a plant that had a fire last year. So we're accelerating some solutions in that area. And a solution that we're contemplating is the interconnection of several communities there. If we were to do that, that actually will allow for us to incorporate even more renewables than if you had these smaller individual systems. So that can be pretty exciting as well to open up those opportunities. Again, always with the eye on the ball of we can't compromise reliability, especially in these really northern isolated areas that are really, you know, there's no other solution there for their power supply. And so from a cost perspective too, we can't be adding additional costs. So it's a balance, but that's really how we're considering that at this point.
That's great. Thank you, Jennifer. Another question, I'm not going to direct this to anyone specifically, but just around kind of working with Indigenous and First Nations communities. Jennifer, I know you kind of made reference to that early on, but just in terms of the potential to work with those communities, either as partners or as generators, and where you might be purchasing then electricity or generation from them. Anyone kind of speak to what the potential there is and how we might move forward on that? Keith, I see you nodding, and do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, thank you very much. When we look forward to solving for our electricity needs and reliability and all of the above, you know, partnerships are going to be key, and partnerships with First Nations, and they have a lot of interest in generating electricity and the supply of that. You know, in New Brunswick here, we recently concluded an RFP for locally owned renewable energy supply, and we had an allotment that we were focused very much with our First Nation partners for 40 megawatts of renewable energy, and we've seen a very good response from many communities for those projects. And we moved forward. We did move forward and satisfied the full 40 megawatts, and one project's in operation. The next one is very close to being commercial. So it's those types of partnerships that will be key moving forward to solve for that diversity that I spoke about earlier, and making sure that for us, all New Brunswickers have an opportunity to participate in this landscape moving forward. And certainly our partnerships with First Nations are a key component of that.
Well, thank you, Keith. We are basically at time. We're not going to be able to address all the questions, but I just want to give our panelists a last kind of 20 seconds if you want to kind of make any final comments. Again, there's lots of topics we could talk about, you know, the future of power costs and the factors, how electricity demand might be increasing now as we shift to electricity. But maybe just, Rick, any final comments you just wanted to leave the panelists with our audience with, just as we close, and just in 20 seconds each? Rick?
Yeah. Okay. I think the collaboration piece for us really is about interconnections, whether that's a path that allows higher renewable energy content as we try to decarbonize. You know, that's where the focus is now. Strategically, we know if people are going to benefit from electrification, from energy conversion away from oil-based sources of energy, then it's going to mean that we need a stronger integrated system. And we know collaboration and work among the provinces has been very high, and lots of ideas and evolving technologies to consider. So I think the next 10 years are going to be extremely exciting in this industry, and one that our economy, I'll speak for Nova Scotia for sure, I think will be stronger because of it, not only because of the jobs and the creation, but also if we're able to reduce emissions, manage costs, doing things in a very capital-focused manner where we have the highest level of capital effectiveness as we make that transition, businesses will be stronger, and it will put them in a better position to compete on an international stage, you know, with some of our largest customers being exporters.
Great, thank you. Jason, was any closing comment you just wanted to emphasize?
Yeah, I'll just echo maybe what Rick touched on. You know, projects like the Atlantic loop and whatnot that will strengthen our regional systems, and working together to make sure that happens, from our perspective, is priority number one right now, with growing electrification and the need to meet greenhouse gas reduction targets. I don't think there's any question that we have to move this forward sooner than later, and we will need support from government partners as well as utility partners. So I look forward to seeing that happen to the benefit of everybody in the region.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and a special thank you to Jennifer, for Rick, for Jason and Keith for taking the time to kind of share some of your insights and perspectives. This concludes our third session. Again, the recording will be available tomorrow. The slides are up on our website, and next month we should have a short synopsis of the full series that we'll be sharing with you, just to give you some of the highlights if you missed some of the earlier series. So again, thank you for attending. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Colleen at Atlantica Centre for Energy for partnering with us. We will be sending out a very short survey by email. If you can just respond to that, it's just part of our evaluation and feedback on today's webinar. And then just a final reminder, if you can just move to the next slide, Erica, to sign up for the next webinar series that launches in 2 weeks' time with our kind of economic recovery and what we see happening for Atlantic Canada. So I encourage you to continue the discussion with APEC as we continue to move forward, tackling some of the key issues for this region. So again, thank you. This has been a great series. We've enjoyed talking about the future of energy. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you at future sessions. Thank you very much indeed.